hope you're all well today, wherever you're listening, London, Birmingham, Manchester, or even a quiet little town somewhere in Britain. Today, I want to share a story that changed my life and almost destroyed my family. It's about money, inheritance, and the choices that tear people apart. Sit down, make yourself comfortable, and prepare. This story isn't easy to hear. You see, when I was a boy, I never thought that money could be anything more than numbers, coins, and notes in a bank. But life has a way of teaching lessons the hard way. Lessons about trust, greed, pride, and the bonds that hold a family together or break it apart. And this story, my friends, is one of those lessons. So, take a deep breath and imagine yourself in a small house in Birmingham, a home filled with laughter, arguments, and memories that would last a lifetime. Now, imagine that home being threatened, not by fire, not by storms, but by something far more insidious: money. I grew up in a small, brick-built house in Birmingham, nestled between rows of similar houses. My father built it with his bare hands, brick by brick, while running a small business that barely kept us afloat. To outsiders, we seemed ordinary, maybe even lucky. But behind the walls, there was a tension that only children notice subtly. Whispers about bills, quiet arguments in the kitchen, and the unspoken pressure to succeed. My siblings and I had always trusted each other. We shared toys, secrets, even dreams about the future. My brother loved football, my sister adored reading, and I was the dreamer, always imagining the future, always hoping that one day our small family would be set. Money wasn't a topic we discussed openly, but it shaped every corner of our lives, every meal, every outing. I remember winter evenings, sitting by the small fireplace, watching the wind rattle the windows, listening to my father's heavy footsteps upstairs. He was a man of quiet pride. He never complained, never asked for help, and carried the weight of our household like a shield. We didn't know it then, but that shield was fragile, and the cracks in it were about to widen in ways none of us could have imagined. As I grew older, I began to notice the small things. My father's secret savings hidden in drawers, my mother's worried glances at the bills, my siblings' quiet discussions about the future. Everything hinted that money was more than coins. It was a force that could unite or divide. Then the day came, a day I will never forget. My father passed away, quietly, peacefully, in his sleep. I thought we were prepared, but nothing could have readied us for the storm that followed. A few weeks later, the solicitor called us in to read the will. We sat in the dimly lit office, my siblings and I, faces pale, hearts racing. I thought I would inherit the house, the family home, the memories we had built together. But when the words were spoken, I didn't. My brother received the front half, my sister the back, and I was left with a fraction I had never expected. I remember standing there, my hands shaking, as my family stared at me with unreadable expressions. The air was thick with disbelief, tension, and a silent accusation I couldn't name. I felt powerless, not just about the property, but about my family itself. Something inside me cracked that day. The solicitor's words echoed in my mind long after we left the office. Every sentence seemed designed to weigh me down. Your share, your entitlement, your portion. I repeated them silently, trying to make sense of numbers and clauses, but what struck me most wasn't the legal language. It was the silence that followed. The silence that screamed louder than any argument. Money had already begun its work of dividing us. And as we drove home that evening, the streets of Birmingham blurred past me. The familiar sights, the corner shop, the small park, the pubs where we used to play as kids, felt different somehow. They were no longer just memories. They were reminders of what we were at risk of losing. But that was only the beginning. The real shock came weeks later, when I discovered what had really been happening behind closed doors. My sister had secretly taken out a loan against her share of the house, a debt none of us knew about. And my brother, he wanted to sell his portion immediately, without consulting anyone. Every word, every glance in those days felt like a dagger to the chest. And me, I had no choice but to watch. Watch as the home we loved, the memories we cherished, began to crumble because of greed and desperation. I remember sitting alone in the old living room, the walls echoing with laughter that would never return. I could almost hear my father's voice telling me to be patient, to be wise, to look beyond the immediate pain. But the betrayal stung like a physical blow, a reminder that money can twist even the closest bonds into something unrecognizable. I spent nights pacing through the empty corridors, imagining arguments that hadn't happened yet, rehearsing conversations I hoped would prevent further disaster. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I could only think about the family I loved and how it might be lost forever. And through it all, I began to understand a painful truth. Wealth isn't just measured in pounds, it's measured in trust. And that trust had been broken. After the shock and the betrayal, I didn't know how to breathe. Every step I took through the house felt heavier than the last. The rooms we had once filled with laughter now echoed with emptiness. I would wander from the kitchen to the living room, touching the edges of furniture that had witnessed decades of family moments. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, the smell of Sunday roasts. And now, all that warmth felt like it had been stripped away. At night, I would sit by the window, staring at the dimly lit streets of Birmingham. The fog rolling in from the city seemed to seep into my soul. I could hear the distant sounds of traffic, the muffled laughter of children playing outside, reminders that life moved on, even when ours had come to a standstill. I felt anger, not just at my siblings, but at myself. How had we let this happen? How had love turned into suspicion and trust into resentment? And yet, underneath the anger, there was fear. Fear that the bonds that had held us together for so long were irreparably broken. Fear that our father's legacy, not just the house, but the lessons he had tried to teach us, would be lost to petty disputes and greed. I remember walking through the empty hallways late one night, tracing the cracks in the walls with my fingers, feeling the cold plaster, and thinking about how fragile everything was. The pictures on the walls, my father's stern but loving face, our childhood photos, seemed to stare back at me, silently asking, "What are you going to do now?" I replayed every argument in my mind, every look exchanged, every word unsaid. I realized that this wasn't just about property or money. It was about trust, respect, and understanding. And the hardest part was facing the truth that I had allowed myself to be blinded by expectations. I had expected my family to act as one, to protect each other, and in that expectation, I had ignored the reality that people change when stakes are high. The nights grew longer, and I found myself talking to the empty rooms, as if the house itself could hear me. "We were once a family," I whispered to the shadows, "and we can be again." I don't know if anyone heard me, but I needed to say it, needed to feel it, because otherwise, I feared we might truly be lost. Every small noise, the creak of the stairs, the gust of wind rattling the windows, the distant hum of a train, felt like a message, a reminder that time was moving, and we couldn't stay frozen in fear and anger forever. And in that frozen, silent darkness, a realization struck me. If we didn't act, if we didn't communicate, if we didn't rebuild, the house would remain divided, and so would our hearts. So I began to prepare, not to fight, not to argue, but to reach out, to my brother, my sister, to find the words that could mend what had been broken. And I remembered my father's advice, spoken so long ago, almost as if he knew this day would come. "Family is stronger than money, son. Never forget that." The emotional storm raged within me. Grief, fear, guilt, anger. But somewhere in that chaos, a tiny spark of hope flickered. I realized that the pain we were feeling was not the end, but a chance to rebuild something stronger, something wiser. And in that moment, I understood what it meant to truly fight for family. Not with words, but with patience, love, and courage. After weeks of silence, late-night pacing, and endless internal arguments, something had to give. I knew that if we didn't speak, if we didn't confront the truth, the cracks in our family would only grow deeper. So one cold evening, I called my brother and sister. We agreed to meet at the house, in the very living room where our childhood memories were stacked like old books on the shelves. I remember feeling my heart hammering against my chest, unsure if they would even answer, unsure if they would yell, cry, or simply walk away. When they arrived, the house felt smaller than before, not because of its walls, but because of the weight of months of resentment and misunderstanding. We sat down, not across from each other, but together, side by side, like we used to when we were children. And for a moment, the tension was almost unbearable. Words hung in the air, unspoken, heavy, waiting to be released. I started slowly, my voice trembling at first. I know we've all been hurt, and I know money has caused anger and fear between us, but I don't want us to lose what we've had all our lives. I want to find a way, together. My sister looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously, while my brother shifted in his seat, silent but listening. And in that silence, a fragile bridge began to form. The conversation wasn't easy. There were tears, raised voices, and confessions I never expected to hear. My sister admitted the loan she had taken, the fear that had driven her. My brother explained why he wanted to sell his share immediately. Debts, pressure, panic, and I shared my own feelings, the fear that we were losing not just a house, but each other. The words were raw, real, and painful, but necessary. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the windows, and slowly the tension began to ease. We started to remember why we were siblings in the first place, the laughter, the arguments, the shared dreams. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. Money can divide families faster than almost anything else, but patience, love, and understanding can mend even the deepest cracks. We often think wealth is about pounds and property, but real wealth is trust, loyalty, and the bonds we share. I have seen firsthand how greed, fear, and misunderstanding can make even the closest of families strangers to one another. And I've seen how courage, honesty, and forgiveness can bring them back together. It's not an easy path, and it isn't always quick, but it is always worth it. Think of your own family, your own loved ones. The house, the inheritance, the money, these are only tools. They are never the end goal. The true legacy we leave is in the people we love, the relationships we nurture, and the lessons we pass down. Protect that, treasure that, and you will never truly be poor, no matter what the bank account says. I've also learned that mistakes are inevitable. We will all falter, misjudge, or misunderstand, but it's how we respond with honesty, reflection, and care that defines the strength of our family and the depth of our character. Wealth may come and go, but the lessons we learn and the love we give endure forever. So, if you ever find yourself in a storm like ours, money disputes, misunderstandings, resentment, remember, pause, breathe, and choose the bond of family over the allure of fortune. It will guide you through, just as it guided us. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. Money can divide families faster than almost anything else, but patience, love, and understanding can mend even the deepest cracks. We often think wealth is about pounds and property, but real wealth is trust, loyalty, and the bonds we share. I have seen firsthand how greed, fear, and misunderstanding can make even the closest of families strangers to one another. And I've seen how courage, honesty, and forgiveness can bring them back together. It's not an easy path, and it isn't always quick, but it is always worth it. Think of your own family, your own loved ones. The house, the inheritance, the money, these are only tools. They are never the end goal. The true legacy we leave is in the people we love, the relationships we nurture, and the lessons we pass down. Protect that, treasure that, and you will never truly be poor, no matter what the bank account says. I've also learned that mistakes are inevitable. We will all falter, misjudge, or misunderstand, but it's how we respond with honesty, reflection, and care that defines the strength of our family and the depth of our character. Wealth may come and go, but the lessons we learn and the love we give endure forever. So, if you ever find yourself in a storm like ours, money disputes, misunderstandings, resentment, remember, pause, breathe, and choose the bond of family over the allure of fortune. It will guide you through, just as it guided.